The sterile blue light of the monitor burns into my eyes, but it's the numbers burning into my mind that freeze the air in my lungs. My finger hovers over the screen, tracing the line. Outgoing wire transfer.
The date.
The amount. $950,000.
Gone.
Just gone. From our joint account. The one we built, dollar by painful dollar, for years. The silence in the office is suddenly deafening. The hum of the computer, the distant city drone outside the triple-paned window, it all recedes. There is only the screen, the number, and the cold, vast space where trust used to live. My breath catches, a ragged, painful sound in the quiet. My hands are shaking. I grip the edge of the desk, the polished wood smooth and unyielding beneath my trembling fingers.
How? Why?
There's no memo line, no explanation. Just the stark, terrifying fact of the missing money. My entire future, our future, evaporated into a digital ether. The dread coils in my stomach, a living thing, cold and heavy. It feels like falling, endlessly falling, with no ground in sight. The room spins slightly. This can't be real. This can't be happening. $950,000. If this story hits you somewhere deep, if you've ever felt the ground drop out from under you, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe. It helps me bring more of these stories to life, more than you know. Our life before felt like a storybook, the kind with thick pages and illustrations that glowed with warmth. We met young, built everything from scratch. He was my rock, my horizon. We didn't start with much, just a shared dream and a willingness to work until our hands ached. He was the charming one, the one who could talk to anyone, make anyone laugh. I was the planner, the one who kept the books, who worried about the details no one else wanted to think about. It was a good balance. We trusted each other implicitly, financially, and otherwise. Every major decision was a conversation, a shared whiteboard session, a late-night talk with mugs of tea growing cold between us. We pooled everything, celebrated the small victories, paying off a student loan, the down payment on our first tiny place, finally being able to afford that one nice dinner out. We built a comfortable life, not extravagant, but secure. The joint account was the beating heart of that security. It represented our combined effort, our shared future. Every deposit felt like another brick in the wall of our safety, our dreams. There was no his money or my money, only our money. That's how it felt, how it was. The LLC, my LLC, came about a few years into the marriage. It was initially for a side project, a small consulting business I was planning. He was supportive, even helped with some of the initial paperwork, though he mostly left the details to me. We considered making it a joint venture, but decided it was simpler to keep it separate, just in case. The project never fully launched. Life got busy, but the LLC structure remained. It was just a name on paper, a dormant entity with a bank account that held a few $1,000s and received the occasional small payment from freelance work. He knew its name, knew I controlled it, but it wasn't part of our day-to-day finances. It was just there. A technicality. A piece of administrative leftover from a previous plan. I never imagined it would become anything significant, let alone a shield or a weapon.
It was just my LLC.
A forgotten detail in the comfortable landscape of our shared life. We talked about dissolving it, but never got around to it. There was always something more pressing, something more important, like planning vacations or renovating the kitchen, or just enjoying quiet evenings together. Life felt full, anchored. We were a unit, indivisible. The thought of one of us acting unilaterally with our finances, especially with such a massive sum, was simply unthinkable. It was beyond the realm of possibility, like the sky turning green or the ocean freezing solid. It was a violation of a fundamental law of our universe. Our universe, built on trust, on shared goals, on love. The cracks appeared subtly at first, like hairline fractures in a foundation you don't notice until the wall starts to lean. He started working later. Big project, he'd say, voice tight with a fabricated weariness. His phone became an extension of his hand, face down on tables, screen locking the second I entered the room. He'd take calls outside, voice low, explaining it was a sensitive client issue. Our late-night talks dwindled. The warmth between us cooled, replaced by a polite distance, a chasm that widened with each passing day. He was physically present, sitting across from me at the dinner table, sleeping beside me in bed, but his mind, his spirit, felt 1,000 miles away. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd snap.
I'm stressed, okay?
Work is crazy. Just leave me alone, his eyes, once full of laughter and affection for me, now held a guarded, almost defensive look. He was building walls, brick by brick, right in front of me, and I didn't understand why. I tried harder, cooking his favorite meals, initiating conversations, suggesting weekend trips. He'd nod, sometimes agree, but his heart wasn't in it. It felt like performing for an audience that had already left the theater. The man I loved, the man I built my life with, was becoming a stranger in our own home. The air grew thick with unspoken things, with his evasiveness, with my growing unease. It wasn't just about the late nights anymore. It was about the fundamental shift in connection, the missing pieces of him that I could no longer find. Something was terribly wrong, I knew it, deep down in my gut where the cold dread first took root. But I clung to hope, to the memory of the man he used to be, the life we used to share, believing that somehow we could find our way back. My attempts to bridge the distance were met with a frustrating blend of dismissal and irritation. I suggested therapy, he scoffed. Therapy? For what? I told you. I'm just busy. I tried planning a romantic getaway, just the two of us. He pleaded exhaustion and an impossible work schedule. Every effort I made to reconnect felt like reaching across a widening canyon. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I overthinking? Was I paranoid? He was so convincing in his excuses, so practiced in his deflection. He'd turn my concern into an accusation. You don't trust me, do you? He'd say, his voice laced with fake hurt. After all we've been through? He made me feel guilty for even questioning the space growing between us. He was gaslighting me, systematically eroding my confidence in my own perceptions, making me doubt what my heart and my gut screamed was true. The man I thought I knew, the man who swore he'd always be honest with me, was lying. I could feel it in the air he breathed, in the way he avoided my gaze, in the forced casualness of his voice. But I had no proof, nothing concrete, just this suffocating sense of wrongness. I started checking things I never had before. Our phone bill, seeing a number repeated over and over late at night. Social media, finding accounts that looked familiar, linked to people I didn't know. The knot in my stomach tightened. He was creating a secret life, a life that had no room for me. The pain was physical, a dull ache behind my ribs, a constant pressure in my chest. Sleep offered no escape. My nights were filled with anxious thoughts, dissecting every interaction, every lie. I was walking on eggshells, terrified of setting him off, terrified of pushing him further away, even as he was already gone. The decision to check the finances wasn't born of suspicion initially, but of a vague, unsettling feeling about our overall security. He'd been so secretive about the big project, claiming it was high stakes, demanding. I thought perhaps it involved a significant investment, or maybe a new venture that required shuffling assets. I just wanted to understand, to be in the loop, as we always had been. I logged into the joint bank account, a familiar interface I'd accessed countless times over the years. The numbers loaded slowly, my heart rate picking up pace with a spinning cursor. I navigated to the recent transactions, scrolling down. Rent payment, utility bill, groceries, normal. Then my eyes snagged. The date was recent, just a few days ago. The amount was astronomical. $950,000. Outgoing wire transfer. The recipient details were cryptic, just a string of numbers and letters, no familiar name. My breath hitched. This wasn't a bill. This wasn't an investment we'd discussed. This was nearly our entire liquid savings. A tidal wave of panic washed over me, cold and relentless. My hands trembled so violently, I had to steady them on the keyboard. I clicked on the transaction, hoping for more details and explanation. There was nothing. Just the date, The amount and the word processed, my mind raced, grasping for a rational explanation. Was it a mistake? A fraudulent transfer? But the amount was too specific, too large to be random fraud. It felt deliberate. My fingers fumbled, dialing his number. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. He was screening me. The cold dread intensified, solidifying into a terrifying certainty. This wasn't a mistake. He had taken the money. Our money. And he was hiding it from me. The truth, when it finally crashed down, wasn't a slow dawning but a brutal, instantaneous explosion. I didn't find a sugar-coated confession or a gentle explanation. I found her. Her name, mentioned in a panicked email he'd left open on his laptop screen, buried deep in a folder labeled Project Alpha. Her name, linked to real estate listings. Her name, appearing on that damned bank transaction if you cross-referenced it with a few key searches I stumbled upon in a desperate, all-consuming dive into public records and financial trails. The pieces snapped together with sickening clarity. The late nights weren't about work. The secretive calls weren't about clients. The coldness wasn't just stress. It was her. It had always been her. And the money, the $950,000, it wasn't for a project. It wasn't an investment. It was for her. A condo. Nearly $1 million of our shared life, our security, our dreams, weaponized and deployed to buy affection and build a new life with someone else. The pain was so sharp, so physical, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. It wasn't just the betrayal of the marriage, the shattering of the vows. It was the calculated cruelty of the financial theft. He wasn't just cheating. He was dismantling our life, piece by piece, using the very foundations we built together to construct a future that excluded me entirely. The man I loved was a stranger and a thief. The world tilted on its axis. The comfortable reality I'd inhabited for years dissolved, revealing a desolate, treacherous landscape. My focus shifted instantly. The pain of the affair was a raw wound, yes, but the theft was an existential threat. He wasn't just breaking my heart, he was trying to leave me with nothing. The fear was paralyzing, but beneath it, a cold, hard resolve began to form. He wanted to erase me, to discard me like yesterday's trash. But he wouldn't get away with it. Not like this. Not with our money. The confrontation was brutal, everything I feared and worse. I didn't approach it with tears and pleas. The discovery of the money and her had cauterized the vulnerability. I approached it with the cold, hard facts. I laid out the bank statements, highlighted the wire transfer, showed him the email mentioning her name, linked to property searches. His face drained of color, a flicker of shock replaced quickly by rage. "You went through my things," he roared, trying to turn the tables, to make me the offender. I didn't flinch. "Our things," I corrected him, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Our money," he denied it at first, a desperate, pathetic attempt to cling to his lies. He spun elaborate tales of a secret investment, a shell company, non-disclosure agreements. But his eyes darted, his hands shook, the sweat beaded on his forehead. The performance was terrible. When he saw I wasn't buying it, the denial melted into aggression. "So what?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "It's done. The money's gone. You think you can stop me? You think you have any power here?" He stood tall, puffing out his chest, trying to intimidate me with his perceived control. He spoke of lawyers, of leaving me with the bare minimum, of how he had protected himself, how he had been smart. He made it clear he saw me as an obstacle, a nuisance to be swept away. He had moved the money, he had secured her future, and he believed he held all the cards. He had drained our shared account, our shared security, and left me feeling utterly exposed, vulnerable and powerless. It felt like the end. Everything we had built, everything I had trusted, was gone, and he stood there, smug in his betrayal, convinced he had won. He truly believed he had left me with nothing, trapped and defeated. The air in the room crackled with his perceived victory and my crushing despair. All seemed lost. The weight of it threatened to suffocate me. In the days that followed the initial confrontation, the despair was a heavy shroud. I felt adrift, untethered. He was already mentally and financially gone. His lawyers sent initial letters, cold and clinical, outlining his position, confirming his intent to minimize my settlement. They painted a picture of me as a disgruntled spouse, exaggerating claims, while positioning him as a victim of a failing marriage, simply trying to secure his future and conveniently omitting the mistress and the origin of the funds for her condo. I consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, pragmatic woman who listened patiently, her expression grim. She explained the complexities, the difficulty of tracing funds, the potential for lengthy legal battles. It would be expensive, emotionally draining, and there was no guarantee of recovering everything he'd stolen. The odds felt stacked against me. He had the money, the means to drag things out, to bury me in legal fees. The condo, his extravagant gift to her, felt like a taunt, a monument to his betrayal built with my own bricks. Every phone call with my lawyer, every document I reviewed, reinforced the bleak reality. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had meticulously planned to break me financially. He was succeeding. I lay awake at night, staring into the darkness, the fear a constant companion. How would I rebuild? How would I survive this financial wreckage he'd deliberately created? The future I'd envisioned was gone, replaced by a terrifying uncertainty. It felt like I was drowning, the weight of his actions pulling me under, the surface of the water, and the hope of air, receding further and further away. He had thought of everything, covered all his tracks, left me isolated and vulnerable. But despair can be a strange kind of fuel. It burns everything away until only the hard, resilient core remains. Sitting with my lawyer, poring over the scattered remnants of our financial life, something snagged my attention. The wire transfer details, the recipient information, it was sparse, intentionally so, but it listed a receiving entity. The lawyer had focused on tracing the funds from our joint account, following the digital breadcrumbs. My mind, however, fixated on the destination. The recipient entity name didn't immediately register as a person or a company I knew. It was a generic-sounding name, something like Maplewood Holdings LLC or similar. I frowned, racking my brain. Why would he send money to a random LLC? Unless it wasn't random. Unless it was the entity that held the title to the condo he'd bought for her. My lawyer looked skeptical. Could be anyone, she said. A developer, a holding company, a shell corporation he set up, but something clicked in my memory. Maplewood. That name. Where had I heard that name before? I went back to my own records, the dusty files I'd kept from years ago. Paperwork for my own dormant side project. The consulting business. The LLC I'd set up. I dug through boxes in the attic, retrieved the old binder. I flipped through the pages, past the business plan drafts, the market research, the initial registration documents. And there it was. The name of my LLC. The exact same name. Maplewood Holdings LLC. My breath hitched. It couldn't be. Could it? Why would he transfer the money to my LLC? It made no sense. Unless he thought it was a shell company or a neutral third party. Unless, in his haste to hide the transaction, to distance himself, he'd grabbed a familiar corporate name he thought was safe, not realizing or forgetting it was the name of my dormant entity. My heart started to pound, not with fear, but with a sudden, electrifying surge of possibility. I showed the document to my lawyer. She stared at it, then back at the transfer details. Her eyes widened. Slowly, a smile spread across her face, a slow, dangerous kind of smile. Well, now, she said, her voice low and filled with a newfound steel. This changes everything. The condo title search. We ordered it immediately, expedited the process. The tension while we waited was unbearable, a tight coil in my chest. When the document arrived, my lawyer opened it carefully. We leaned over it together, our heads close. The address matched the property records I'd found linked to her. And the owner, the legal title holder? Maplewood Holdings LLC. My LLC. It was real. He had used our money to buy a condo for his mistress, but somehow, through incompetence, haste, or unbelievable cosmic irony, he had put the title into the name of my company. The ground wasn't just back beneath my feet, it felt solid, unshakable. The fear that had suffocated me for weeks receded, replaced by a cold, clear determination. He thought he had taken everything. He thought he had left me powerless. He was wrong. So utterly, completely wrong. The turning point wasn't just a realization, it was a resurrection. I was no longer the victim. I was the owner. And I held the deed to his betrayal. The final confrontation didn't happen in a stuffy lawyer's office or a tense courtroom. It happened in the dining room of our house, the house he thought he was leaving me penniless in. I set the stage carefully. I didn't raise my voice, didn't show the storm of emotions raging inside me. I was calm, measured, radiating a quiet, unnerving power. I had the documents spread out on the polished table. The bank statement with the wire transfer highlighted, the email linking him to her and property searches, and the jewel in the crown, the official copy of the condo deed, clearly listing Maplewood Holdings LLC as the owner, and the LLC registration document listing me as the sole proprietor. He arrived, looking harried and slightly smug, probably expecting another round of tearful accusations or desperate pleas. He sat down, leaning back in his chair, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing at the papers with a dismissive wave. I met his gaze, holding it steadily. "This," I said, my voice low and steady, "is the story of how you stole nearly $1 million from our joint account." His smugness faltered. "We've been over this," he started. "I told you it was an investment, a shell company." "No." I cut him off, my voice sharp, like snapping ice. "This is how you bought a condo for her." I slid the email across the table. He picked it up, scanned it, his face paling slightly. The smugness was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. "That doesn't prove anything," he mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. "And this?" I pushed the bank statement forward. $950,000.
Gone.
To buy her a little love nest, he opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to deflect. And that's when I dropped the hammer. I slid the condo deed across the table, placing it right in front of him. His eyes scanned the address, the date, then fixed on the owner's name. Maplewood Holdings LLC. He froze. His eyes flickered up to mine, then back to the document, then back to mine again. He didn't understand. He looked genuinely confused. "Maplewood Holdings?" he stammered.
What?
"What is this?" I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with a cold, hard satisfaction that felt sweeter than anything I'd ever tasted. "That, my dear husband," I said, my gaze locked on his face as the realization dawned on him, "is my LLC. The one I set up years ago. The one you helped me with the paperwork for. The one that legally owns that condo you just paid for with our money." The blood drained from his face entirely. His jaw went slack. The smugness, the arrogance, the practiced lies, they all evaporated, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. He stammered, incoherent sounds escaping his lips. "But, no, that's not possible." He grabbed the LLC registration document, his hands shaking violently, saw my name there, staring back at him. Undeniable proof. He had tried to be clever, to hide the transaction using a corporate name, and in his haste, his sloppiness, his monumental self-absorption, he had used the name of my company. He had inadvertently transferred the legal ownership of his grand gesture of betrayal, purchased with stolen funds, directly into my waiting hands. The power in the room shifted completely, irrevocably. The man who minutes ago had been condescending and smug, confident in his victory, was now a trapped animal, eyes wide with fear, realizing the extent of his colossal, self-inflicted mistake. He was blindsided, utterly and beautifully blindsided. The condo wasn't hers. It wasn't his. It was mine. The silence that followed was thick with the death of his arrogance. He stared at the documents, then at me, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He sputtered, tried to argue, to claim it was a mistake, that I must have somehow engineered this. I just watched him, a cool detachment settling over me. The rage was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. I had the proof. I had the power. His blustering was pathetic. He tried to backtrack, to apologize, to beg. He painted a picture of a moment of weakness, a terrible mistake fueled by unhappiness. It was a desperate, transparent performance. I didn't interrupt. I let him plead, let him humiliate himself. It was a small, cold comfort for the weeks of agonizing pain he had inflicted. When he finally exhausted himself, sinking back into his chair, defeated, I spoke. "It's over," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Our marriage is over. And the condo. The condo is mine." He started to protest again, talking about the money he'd put in, the injustice. "Our money," I corrected him again. "You used our shared funds, funds that were accumulated during our marriage, funds that I contributed to purchase an asset that is now legally registered in the name of my company. That's not injustice. That's the consequence of your actions." The legal proceedings were swift, surprisingly clean. With the condo deed in my name, his leverage dissolved. The $950,000 transfer, intended to secure his mistress's future, became a catastrophic liability for him. The court recognized the funds as marital assets and the condo as a substituted asset, now legally owned by an entity under my sole control. He fought, of course, tried to argue the LLC was a joint asset, but the registration documents, the paper trail I had kept, were undeniable. He walked away with next to nothing, his grand plan having spectacularly backfired. The mistress, I heard, was furious, feeling used and discarded. She got nothing but the knowledge that their future, built on lies and theft, had crumbled before it even began. The aftermath wasn't a Hollywood ending with triumphant music and perfect closure. There was no joy in his downfall, only a profound, weary sense of vindication. The pain of the betrayal lingered, a dull ache that might never fully disappear. Trust, once shattered, doesn't easily reassemble. But the fear was gone. The crushing weight of vulnerability had lifted. I hadn't just survived. I had fought back, using the very tools he thought would destroy me. The condo itself was a complex symbol. It represented his betrayal, yes, but it also represented my resilience, my unexpected victory. I didn't keep it. Selling it felt like releasing the last tangible link to the ugliness. The money from the sale, after covering legal fees, wasn't a windfall. It was the restoration of what was rightfully mine. It was my security back, my future rebuilt. I learned painful lessons about the fragility of trust, the hidden depths of human deception. But I also learned about my own strength, my capacity to navigate unimaginable pain and fight for what was mine. My life now is quieter, simpler, built on a foundation I am constructing myself, brick by careful brick. There are no grand plans built on someone else's promises, just the steady, reliable rhythm of my own effort. The experience left scars, a permanent wariness, but also a deep, quiet confidence. I faced the storm and emerged, not unscathed, but standing, stronger than I ever knew I could be. The forgotten LLC, that dusty piece of paper from a different life, became the key to unlocking my freedom, a silent, bureaucratic avenger in a story of love and betrayal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was stolen and, in the process, reclaiming myself. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for what's yours when everything felt lost, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.